we're starting up QCA again. Welcome, YouTubers. We're only going to do it for an hour. It's going to be, currently we have it scheduled for 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's in the United States. Here in Mooresville, North Carolina, USA. And we do have 4 people in the audience here on Discord who can participate by raising their hand if they want to ask a question. We can actually come on in. So this is QCA. Why did it go away and why did it come back? Let me answer that question first of all. Okay, so QCA went away because it was just too much. We were doing it every day at like 6 or 7 or something like that, and it was fantastic. People were really, really popular, but it was just too much effort, and I wasn't, I was getting fat. So I decided to kind of make it once a week, and I actually got rid of it, and then I will bring it back. So we're going to do it on Saturday. Now today is an exception. I went ahead and put it on the schedule for 2, and it was too late to change it. So let me tell you about the schedule for QCA and the schedule going forward really quick. You don't get fat from QCA. Okay, so don't get fat from tech. We're going to talk about that. In fact, that's one of the questions I want to answer that has been kind of implicitly asked here. Okay, so the first question is, what is QCA and what is the schedule? So QCA is the same thing as before: questions, conversations, and advice. We have interactive conversations. Usually we have a guest here. It's funny that Matt's not here. He's probably asleep. Matt's actually Mr. Shells is one of our most popular panel members in QCA, but he's not here today. Kind of blindsided him. But so if you'd like to come in and just like comment, that's what this is about, right? This is supposed to be a conversation. It's not just me answering questions, although it is that. Anything goes. It doesn't just have to be tech, right? So it can be tech, it can be cycling, it can be yoga, it can be anything. So anything. So a lot of times people will ask questions that I want to give like a fuller answer to during the day, during the week, and I don't have an opportunity to do that. So what I'll do is I'll queue them up, and I'm going to, in advance, I'm going to pick 1 or 2 because we only have an hour. And then we're going to put those all in a 1-hour broadcast so that people can follow the podcast on Monday if they want to through YouTube or whatever, and then they can do all of that. So that's what QCA is. What is the schedule? As I said, it's going to be Saturdays from 2 to 3 Eastern. We carefully picked that time because, number one, it's a time that fits with the United States and with Europe for the most part. Number two, it's a time. We moved it from Sunday to Saturday, as somebody reminded me, because when we were doing the boost, that time frame goes into the early Monday morning hours for Europeans, and some of them want to participate live, and they don't want to, have to deal with what that would do to their work schedule. So that's why we're doing it. And so, I mean, if you have any questions about the logistics of it, but I really want to make this a habit again. And we're going to just be putting all the questions into, kind of a log, and maybe we'll have 1 or 2 of those questions in the title. I don't know. We'll decide how to do that. But we want to make it searchable through Zettelcast and through the YouTube. All right. So there have been a number of questions come in this week, and we actually already answered some of them, but one of them was that, and I'm just going to go ahead and blurt it out, and I'm going to try to put it on the screen here at the same time. ZQCA. Let me go ahead and just do this here. Okay, so it's 1841. It looks like the archive. Hey, look, here's our old archive. Okay, so if you want to submit a question, I forgot to tell you, go ahead and put it in the Discord. In the that's the only place that we're going to be taking questions. Okay, so if you don't know how to get to the Discord, you just want to ask your question right now, and you're live and you're in the audience, you're welcome to ask your question. And if we have time, I'll try to answer it. But it's really, really important that we get that question into Discord as well, because Discord is where people can help answer the question and they can provide a thread. And we've had, all kinds of expertise, and that's important because of the question I'm about to answer. Very Portland, and I dig. It's actually not a shirt. It's PJs. It's my PJs my wife bought me. Yeah. I'm wearing a big flannel onesie right now, in case you're wondering. I know it probably doesn't sound like it. It's like radio guy with a flannel onesie. All right. So age now. All right. So this is, we already did those things. Okay, so one of the questions that came in today or this week was, how can I get started on the tech scene? And we've answered this question a lot, but I don't mind answering it a lot because it's so important. So the short answer is, you know, find something you want to do that's tech related and start doing it, and then do the research. So RWX, right? You do the research, you read about it, you write code, you write notes, you create a Zettelkasten, and then you go ahead and you execute on that, and you create something. You experience, you explore stuff, you blow things up, And T.J. Holowaychuk, who very famously was the only time that we know of that T.J. Holowaychuk appears on video, was asked the question in a Brazilian JavaScript conference. If you don't know who T.J. Holowaychuk is, Google him. You'll know why he's so important. And he was asked, what should I do? Hey, Og, you should come on in on our panel if you want in Discord. We'd love to have you. And he was asked, what should we do to learn? And his answer was very succinct. Take something that has already exists, it's really popular, and rewrite it. That was his advice. And then he said, the reason that you should do that is because, and he says, you might even end up, he says, you're going to learn a lot along the way. You'll be able to look at the code that somebody else has written, but don't look at it, use it like the answer in the back of the book kind of thing. And then you might even end up writing something better. But TJ has written many things that were better than the original by doing that method. So I second that completely. The question was, well, what book should I buy and stuff like that? And that is always a question. And there's another, I'm going to answer, there's another implicit question in here. What do you think of learning from tech books? And again, this is for the whole group. If anybody else wants to chime in on these answers, I encourage you to come on into the audience on Discord, and there you can raise your hand and you can offer your input as well. You're welcome to type your answers into the chat as well, and I will read them. We're not going to put those up in front of everybody. I've learned that the hard way, not to do that on a YouTube video. So what do you think of tech books? So, hey, how are you? So the answer to learning from tech books is, I'm going to make this one a very short one. I've answered this one before. Some questions are very old. These other ones are way, way old. Yeah, these have already been answered, by the way. These questions, if you're looking at the screen right now, you're seeing a bunch of questions from way before. These have all been answered already, and they're already published, right? There's already videos for these. So there you go. What do you think of learning from tech books? Tech books are good and bad. The books in general are good to learn because they usually have an editor involved. That means somebody has made sure the book content is accurate and it has the same voice. It's usually one or two authors who have a consistent voice throughout, which you don't get from Wikipedia, which is a bunch of people fighting over who. You don't get a consistent voice. Maybe you get the right thing, but it's horrible to read. And three, you've got something to hold in your hand to take with you, and that is what people buy tech books like fat people buy exercise equipment. I mean, I don't, and I'm one of those people, right? So I'm not putting anybody down. They buy tech books with the idea like, oh, if I own this tech book, it's gonna by osmosis I'm gonna learn the thing, And there's something, and this is also by Udemy courses, right? Okay, raise your hand. Raise your hand if you have one or more Udemy courses that have been sitting in your thing that you've never actually done. But it was on sale, and you're like, I want to learn this eventually, and you bought it. How about all the certificate? It's the same thing. Oh, somebody's commenting. They want to raise their hand. Unfortunately, I come in to pay for them. Yeah, we all do it, right? We have this ambitious idea behind us. We want to Udemy movies, whatever. Udemy movies, yeah, they're kind of movies, aren't they, Dave? Yeah, so it is. So the point I'm trying to make is that the idea. I mean, and I actually have a story about this, and I want to tell you my quick story, if that's okay. What time is it? Okay. So here's my quick story. So, nice Sunday, people. Yes. So let's do this. What do you think of learning from tech books? What do you think of tech training courses? Okay. So I'm going to tell you, I'm going to answer both of these questions and these are related to something somebody was asking yesterday. So this is something that came up this week, and I feel like this is the most important topic to talk about in our hour, even though it's a redundant topic that we hit all the time. What do you think of tech training courses? So here's my story. Okay. And many of you have heard this story already. If you have, please just bear with me. So when I was working at Nike, I was Nike's webmaster and their intranet webmaster, to be precise. And I had a really great manager, Barb was her name. And she sent me on many trainings, and I spent $2,500 on like a week of training to learn PL SQL from Oracle, for example, right? And I got to go to Portland and to Washington, I think it was, and I got to live the high life, and like a $50-$60 per day per diem. And I was Mormon at the time, so I would actually went to the Mormon temple instead of like went out and eat and went to the pub or anything. But I remember sitting in the training. And it wasn't Portland. It was Washington, because I definitely traveled. I-15 is, the temple is fantastic. It's really beautiful. So I was Mormon at the time. I'm not Mormon anymore. That's a different question. Somebody's going to have to ask a question on that Sunday. So I tend to rant about the Mormons. I'm not going to do that today. So I went to this training, and the one thing that I came away with is like sort of disgust for training, because I had spent $2,500. Everybody that was there, and believe me, there were a couple of people there that were totally wasting their time, screwing around, coming in late, leaving early, taking huge breaks, and spending all their money and, drinking in the nighttime. And I was, a judgmental Mormon at the time. So I was like, oh my God, these people they're wasting their time. And meanwhile, my, wife at the time was like home slaving over, the young kids all by herself. And I was like, I feel so guilty because I'm up here having fun and training and everything. But the worst part of the training is this. So I got through the training, and everybody at the end of the training got a certificate. They took it home, and they all got the equivalent credential. Every single one of them, including the people that didn't do anything. They didn't do anything. They all got the same credential. It's a gold star mentality. Oh, it's this enterprise training gold star mentality. It's like, you've paid $2,500. You better get a certificate to show for that. So they go home and they put it, they put that up. And it's kind of like this dirty little secret in the enterprise IT training world that everybody knows exists, and everybody's like looking the other way until the hammer comes down economically, and all of a sudden, guess what gets cut? Training. Enterprise training gets cut. Why? Because everybody knows the dirty little secret of enterprise training is nobody's learning anything, right? It's just a big excuse to go have a party. Conferences are even worse, right? And if you can get your company to pay for a conference, they know that you're just going to go there and you're going to meet people. It's mostly just a reward for you to have fun and everything. And I used to have a manager who was like, I'm not going to pay money for you to go to training because it's going to take away from our ability to do X and Y other thing. Right. So here's where the story goes. So I slaved at every one of those trainings I've ever been to, because when I went to those trainings, I had a young wife at home with very young kids, and I was a Mormon. And as I said, I had this like massive guilt complex, because I felt like, how dare I have fun, learning while she's home, doing all this stuff that God told us we were supposed to do. And we won't go there, but I felt horrible. So I was like, kicking butt trying to learn it all. And I did. I learned PL SQL. I came back. I was able to integrate that into our systems and everything. But I tell you that story because when I came away, that whole enterprise gold star training mentality is absolutely detrimental to learning across the board. First of all, it's not real learning, right? They throw a handbook at you. And IBM's even worse, right? So you cannot learn DB2 unless you go to IBM DB2 training. There is literally no resource. If you know what I'm talking about, I know I'm an old timer, and most people don't even know what that is. But if you know what IBM DB2 is, and you should, because it's pretty much the standard database for all big, huge enterprises, even today it still is. But to get trained on it, you have to pay this exorbitant amount. And the only way you can ever make that money to pay to be a DBG, is a chicken and the egg thing, is to do it. It's like this, this horrible cycle of forcing you to be dependent on them, and then forcing you to be dependent on their training. The whole thing is broken. Okay. So I am really against those kind of tech training courses. And here's the end of the story. So I went back and I said, Barb, I feel horrible. I could have learned that in like 4 hours, on a random Tuesday, or I could have just, read it from books. I felt really bad. I told her straight up. I said, I feel like this is a waste of money. And I made a deal with her. And some of you have heard this story before, but I made a deal with her. I said, look, Barb, I tell you what, I'll make you a deal. We have one of the best book resources, best tech book resources in all of the United States in our town. Powell's Books, if you know it. If you don't know Powell's Books and you ever go to Oregon, make sure it's a must see. You must go to Powell's Books. Powell's Bookstore has got to be one of the most famous used bookstores in the entire world. Yeah. And so I told her, I said, look, we got one of the best ones here. And O'Reilly was really hot at the time. O'Reilly is a tech book publisher, of course. And they were actually good back then. They're still pretty good now, but the quality's kind of gone down. And because they got a lot more competition now. So anyway, I told her, I said, look, you give me half of that money. And I, Beaverton, yes, suburb. So you give me half of that money and I will buy the books, and I will get, 10, 15, 20 times more value out of it if you give me the time to work on it on Friday or whatever, and you give me the money to buy those books. And she goes, absolutely. And she trusted me because I had done many things. At that point, I'd already gotten an award for, making SwooshNet, and which was the name of their intranet. And so I had a high level of trust with her, and she goes, absolutely. So she, cut me a check basically for $1,000 and said, okay, go have fun. She didn't ask me for accountability or anything. She goes, I trust you. You're going to do it. She gave me $1,000, which is half the cost of that 1 week of training. And I kid you not, I went to Powell's Books and filled my car trunk with O'Reilly books. And I had those books up until probably 3 years ago, almost every one of them. And I bought them all, and I gave myself a master's degree in technology by taking Max, which was the public transportation. And I would get on Max, and I still to this day have a great affinity and nostalgia for traveling in a bus where it's cold and you're kind of snuggled against the window and you can just look out through the rain and see, people moving as you're flipping through the pages of, TCP/IP Illustrated 2, at Volume 2, and you're like learning about packets and stuff, because that was my master's degree. My master's degree came from books, sometimes outdated, inside of, a bus or a train. And I would read it, and it was just a wonderful, I get all kind of, goosebumps thinking about it, because it was so wonderful. Just learning and reading and like ripping apart that book with having a computer with me, so that when I got to the computer terminal, I actually knew what I was doing, and I would get all excited to try the stuff that I was reading about in the book. So to me, that is learning. That is the best way to learn. And that does kind of meld the answers to what do you think of learning from tech books and what do you think of tech training courses. Now, I have been put off. I've had to write errata and submit reviews. In fact, I've done it three times at this point, where the worst one was teach your kid to code. It was absolutely horrible Python. It was ridiculously bad. Any kid to learn to code Python like that would already have a liability against them. So I rewrote their entire final project within that book, and I posted it to Amazon. To this day, it's still a really popular link, because books, you're going to get radically different things. So a few things about books that I'll tell you to watch out for if you're going to go for a book. First of all, get a book that's current. Absolutely make sure you have a current book. One of the best books out there for learning Go is Head First Go. The problem is it hasn't been updated in 10 years. It still covers like 1.10 or something, and we're on 1.19 with generics and everything. Another example of not making sure you get the right book, there's one of the top selling Go books right now, Mastering Go or something. I bought it, $55 of wasted down the drain, because I bought the book, and the book covers an initial generics specification for Golang that was never put out there. And I couldn't get my money back for the book, and it was too late. Now it's still the most popular book, but guess what? Edition 2 has the generics properly written in it. It's still the most popular book. So do your research, make sure it's the most recent book, check out the authors, make sure you don't ever purchase a book from Packt Publishing, Pakt Publishing. They don't. I have never seen every single Packt Publishing book. They don't do any editing on their books at all. What Packt Publishing does is I'm going to put this in here. I'm going to put this thing here. What is wrong with Packt Publishing? Okay, Packt Publishing regularly flatters random technologists into getting a book. They've approached me twice now to make a book, right? And they flatter, sometimes inexperienced developers or whatever into writing a book. So their whole business model is to get the book out as fast as possible. So they get the book out really fast. They beat everybody else. And in the case of that Go thing, they actually published a book. Can you believe this? I mean, I just can't even deal with this. Okay. Packt Publishing published a book about a specification that was not even official, with no warning whatsoever. So you have all these Go programmers going in here learning generics from this book, and then when they go out to the internet, they're like, "This has nothing to do with the version. It was just a proposal. It wasn't even close to a final thing, and it has no relation whatsoever to the final one." Which at that point, when I bought the book, had already been approved. I didn't know it. So the book comes to me, and I'm like, "Oh my god!" So make sure you do your research. RWX. Make sure if you're going to buy a book, make sure you do your research on the book. Ask around to other people. The Arden Labs books are good, but Go in Action is crap. It's got huge mistakes in 3 different places where it doesn't even follow the traditional model. It doesn't use contexts at all, which are new. And that's largely because it was written and it was kind of old. And the Arden Labs does good things. Okay. I'm putting them down. They're amazing. But the fact that they made that book when they did. And so just be really careful when you pick a book. There was a time when I would say, don't get a tech book at all. And now I'm like working on writing a few of them. I believe the best model for a tech book is free online, maintained by the community with a single voice. That means you have a single author who's like taking an input from people, and then making a printable version of the book, so that it's there. Yeah, I think as Og says here, a living book is really the way to go. So you're not always going to find that. Thank you for the sub, Ant. I just saw that. So that's all I have to say about that. We have 34 minutes left. And I think I've covered the basics of training. Just to recap, if you want to learn anything, do that thing, right? And Go 1.20 is already out. I know. It just barely came out. Hey, stupid, how are you? That's his name, by the way. Stoop Kid. So that's all I have to say about that. The best way to learn is to rip something apart and experiment with it and learn. Now, you are going to have a gap. So the general strategy to me is 2-pronged attack to your learning, right? So what you do is you try to find the best comprehensive resource, whether it's a book or a Wikipedia page or a Udemy course or a YouTube series or, whatever, that's going to take you a long time and be kind of boring, but it's going to be very linear. It's going to cover everything. And then you have the second prong of the approach to learning is you have an interactive project that you want to do. Okay. So you take, our boot camps. So you take that thing that you want to do, right? And you find something that you want to do in the coding language. And by the way, this is super important because if you can't find something that you want to do, there's a good chance you shouldn't be doing it. You shouldn't. Seriously, if you're like, I think I want to learn to code, and you can't think of anything you want to make offhand, then you might want to do some soul searching because maybe coding isn't what you want to do. The only reason I like to code, and I've told people this over and over again, I enjoy coding, but I don't enjoy it as much as people that do competitive programming and stuff. I don't enjoy the process of coding. I enjoy what I get from the coding. Because coding opens up all kinds of possibilities. I think this is one of the reasons ChatGPT and all of those other AI source coding machines are going to take off, even though I don't know what I think about that. Because a lot of people, including enterprise people who are paying money, they just want something. They don't care about how they get it. They just want it, right? And if they can tell an AI that this is the algorithm I want and it can generate the code, they're like, fine, boom. I know that because people have written horrendous code in the past that did the job minimally and it got deployed. And then it would break later, which is why I'm also afraid of AI code. I don't know if it's going to be better than the random thing, So that kind of leads us into another question. What do you think of ChatGPT? And so let's talk about ChatGPT. And so when ChatGPT first came out, I was particularly anti-ChatGPT. And the reason was because for the same reason that I'm sort of anti, what's the other one? The GitHub one, the Microsoft one. What is it? Past the level 3 Google engineering review. Copilot. Yeah, Copilot. So what do I think of these things? I get this question all the time, so I'm going to answer it again. So I do think, AI in general there's another question inside. Will AI take over developer jobs? We'll answer that later. So what do I think of Chat? My first impression of ChatGPT was the same as Copilot. Copilot was made based on Copilot is both of these, by the way, first of all, let me say this. ChatGPT and Copilot are both proprietary applications. They are not FOSS. They're not free and open source applications. These are two applications that were made to make money, that were built off of free information that was released under open source licenses. So already I have a huge problem with that, right? Because Copilot is a proprietary tool now owned by Microsoft and GitHub that they used GitHub source code to create. Free and open source licensed software was used to create a proprietary application that is being used to write software for other enterprises and for FOSS. I have a major problem with that for two reasons. One is it doesn't give any of the open source people credit. It's a complete violation of every open source license that has ever existed. And three, it includes proprietary source code, which has been included in GitHub by accident. This has been proven. They've proven. They actually there was some 3D source code from a game that they found. There was kind of a meme keyword, and they actually found that, and Copilot found it, and they reported it. That means that Copilot source code, generated source code, contains proprietary code as well as free and open source code, none of which is properly licensed. There's no legal team on planet Earth that is ever going to allow code that is generated from Copilot knowingly to ever make it into another proprietary application. Having worked at IBM, I promise you that. I haven't worked at IBM. I promise you that that's not going to happen. Okay. And ChatGPT is largely just Copilot, but a much larger scope. It's been trained off God knows what. Tons and tons of copyrighted information, probably our personal conversations. We don't know what it's been trained off of because it's proprietary. But I bet you, I would bet 99% of the time that ChatGPT has been built off of what are otherwise copyrightable conversations and copyrightable information, and not from public domain information. But we'll never know that. We'll never know that. There has to be an extensive research done in order to uncover the data sources that are being used for ChatGPT. Copilot, we know, came off GitHub, so that one's pretty standard. That's how they were able to uncover the violations so easily, because they already knew that GitHub had source code that was incorrect. By the way, you can use Copilot to look up people's proprietary secret keys. Well, they didn't even think about that. When they put Copilot out, you could actually write code that contained corporate, secret keys, private keys, key pairs and stuff like that had been mistakenly put into GitHub. And now it was permanently embedded in the brain of the AI for Copilot. Now, okay, so those are my problems with it. There are some advantages of it as well, and I want to talk about those, but those are the problems with it, right? So the problem with any AI is that it's being built off of a corpus of data, and that data, we don't know where it came from. Yeah. Oh yeah. People put private keys into GitHub all the time. You can just do a search right now and find like a dozen of them. It's pretty regular. It's a pretty easy way to hack. But that stuff was all permanently saved. By the way, if you don't want to do that in your Kubernetes person and you don't want to put a secret in there, you look up something called sealed secrets. They're really awesome. It's from Bitnami. It's really great stuff. So we use those all the time. Yeah. So can you imagine? I mean, so that the problem of where is the data coming from? If we don't know where the data is coming from, then you've already got a problem, right? Here's why. Because if you've ever worked, and a lot of you who are listening to this don't work for this. I've talked about this so many times, but I have to repeat it over and over and over again because nobody on YouTube or Twitch is talking about this, okay? Because they're not coming from an enterprise background, or they're coming from a Silicon Valley background or something where they give up, they don't care. If you're working for a large corporation as a software engineer and you do not take care to not taint yourself. Tainting, and I'll paraphrase really quickly the lawsuit between Oracle and Google as a citation here. So Google lost the original lawsuit from Oracle when Oracle said there's no way you made that Java engine in that amount of time. And there's no way you did that. You were cheating. Because they asked them, Google goes, Oracle, can we make a Java engine? And the Oracle says no, because they just bought Sun Microsystems, and Oracle says no, we don't. Google says fine, we'll do our own. And then 6 months later, they had one, and Google's like, there's no way you did that fast. So it turns out that Google had hired people from the original Java team who had done Java development, and one of those engineers, you can go look this up, and one of those engineers actually looked at the other source code, and it was just 1 or 2 lines of code. But Oracle, during discovery, was able to prove that line of code, and that engineer had to, under oath, answer, did you copy that line from the original source code? And he said yes. And that one thing tanked the whole thing, and Google lost a multi-million-dollar lawsuit over that one engineer who did that. So it was a mayhem. It was absolute mayhem. A lot of you do remember it. I'm not just, saying this. I'm not just making this up. And then about a decade went on of lawsuits between Oracle and Google, back and forth. It went all the way through the appellate system. At one point, APIs were legally judged to be copyrightable. And that sent just terror throughout the whole industry, because that meant anything that calls itself an API, anything, web API, programmatic API, anything that called itself an API could suddenly be copyrighted, and that you could suddenly charge license fees and all this other stuff for anything that you published as a public API could now become proprietary. And that terrified the entire industry for like a year. And then another appellate judge overruled it. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. So it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and they eventually decided against Oracle, and they in favor of Google, which saved us from the API fiasco. And by the way, the first thing that they lost, they settled out of court for multi-million-dollars. So this software engineer just lost his whole entire lifetime salary many times over by copying one line of code. So the moral of the story is this: if you're a software engineer and you are developing software for a proprietary application for another company, for a big company, whatever that company is, be very, very careful. This is why people have, they hire them for a year before they even let them work on it, because of, non-competes and non-disclosures and stuff. But software engineering, you're dealing with intellectual property all the time. It's one of the reasons I don't like working there. That there's a number of lessons to take from that. I'll let you take your own lessons from that. But given that kind of environment, that litigious environment in the proprietary software industry, where do you think Copilot stands, right? Let me give you another example. VMware refused to use anything from React. I wrote a blog on this. You can go look it up. Because guess what? React was not open source software. You don't believe me? Go look it up. React, when it was first published for the first, I want to say 5 years, is not open source software. And I'm not the one saying that. The legal team at VMware said that. Is not open source. Okay, so this is the original article that I wrote. I believe personally, I'm showing the article on the screen for those that are just listening. This is some old Medium blog from December 4, 2016 that I wrote. And I believe that this blog post was one of many. This one at one point had like over 10,000 views. It was crazy. And eventually, I believe this led to the pressure that came from the Apache Foundation, which said no programmer who has ever participated in any Facebook project is eligible to ever work on any Apache project. I'm not kidding. You can go look it up. The Apache bunk. Yeah. So, and this is why. So, and again, this is all related to Copilot, believe it or not, because this is all related to the legality of Copilot. So this is an actual email that was posted by Juan Menendez from VMware while trying to decide whether their company could use React at all. Our legal department looked at the patents file and again disapproved it. The language of Facebook can sue us if we make assertions. It's too scary for our lawyers. They are claiming exactly what you said the license didn't say. Quote, and this is from the license, this is from the lawyers, that the React license terminates automatically without notice upon VMware's initiation of any patent assertion against Facebook. It's a shame because yes, you should just don't use Copilot at work, but I don't think you should use Copilot at all because of the tainting nature of it. Right? If you've ever used Copilot, you immediately have to deny that you ever used it if you're going to work for a software engineering firm. Because I promise you this is going to happen. It hasn't happened yet that I know of. But eventually, when you work for a very, very secret, stealthy, proprietary, edgy software application, if that's your thing, it's not mine, but if that is your thing, I guarantee you at some point during the legal process of hiring you, they're going to eventually ask you, have you used any AI software to generate code for any substantial projects in the past? And then it comes a question of legal having to decide whether you have been tainted enough. You can look if you even operate the reason if you've been working on proprietary code for another company and you're going to go work for a competitor, even if you don't have an NDA or a non-compete, if you're going to go work for a competitor and you have or just come from that competitor writing actual code for them, their code is in your head. And that, if depending on the size of the company, if you have been a key programmer for that company and they know that you're going out and then they start kicking ass, that company's going to sue the other company and they're going to say, and because that's exactly what happened to Oracle. That's exactly what happened to Oracle. They hired the competitive engineers away from Oracle, who actually, not Oracle or Sun, who had actually been working on the JVM, and they started working for Oracle, and that said, yeah, we copied the code over. So what I'm trying to tell you is that just by working and looking at proprietary code, you are to some degree tainted, and you can be a liability, and you maybe not. But I tell you what, if you're trying to get a job at another company, at some point that company, depending on how stealthy it is and how concerned it is about getting sued or something, they're going to vet you. And one of the things they're going to vet you is they're going to say, what has your exposure been to proprietary software in this space? And if you can either lie or you can say, well, I worked on the JVM while at this other company over here. And they may not hire you just based on that. Or they might hire you and pay you for a year until, a reasonable amount of time has come by legally. And then, which they do all the time. Those big ass companies who have all kinds of money, they will hire you. They will hire you and sit you on the bench working on some other project for a year until you're safe. And then they'll put you on that project. Right. And then they'll put you on the competing project because they don't want to take any legal risks, because these big companies, they're operating at a point that is just, insane when it comes to litigiousness. Right. And one of those exposures that you may not even know you had is using AI generated software, because you don't know the data corpus that was created. Right. You don't know. And I'm not saying that the legal team's going to deny that because you use GPT one time, or you use what is it? The other one, Copilot. You use Copilot once. They're not, it seems silly to me and you to say, well, why would they not hire me because of one use of Copilot that I disclosed, right? But you just don't know. And if you want to make yourself the most employable person possible, which is one of the reasons that I have never accepted any jobs in a similar vein. And this kind of moves into the open GPT thing. We're kind of burning up our whole time here, but I think this is an important topic. So Let's move to the ChatGPT thing, and let me tell you what I mean here. Okay, so ChatGPT, we also have a similar problem. It's just got a much broader scope, right? So you can ask it to write a dialogue between two historical figures, and you get an essay, and you can submit it, and you may have just plagiarized from like 5 or 6 or 7 different people you don't even know. Right. And I don't know how good ChatGPT is at bypassing plagiarism checking software, but it exists. So if be very careful, be very, very careful. If you use ChatGPT to submit homework, right? And you there, okay, so it's going to be ChatGPT versus plagiarism detection software. All right. And the plagiarism detection software, and believe me, it exists. Right. It exists. The plagiarism detection software is getting smarter and smarter, smarter. So pretty soon there's going to be AI running plagiarism detection software. And then there's going to be chat. It's going to be chat. This hasn't happened yet. But if you don't think this is happening, go research plagiarism detection software that already exists in the academic world. Because plagiarism is a constant problem in academia. It's another reason I don't want anything to do with it. And it's a war of escalation. So now you got ChatGPT writing your essay for you, which is already stupid because now you didn't learn anything. And we're going to get back to the why you should use it, right? And that gets back to the education thing. Both of these things are fantastic if you're using them for educational purposes. But just keep in mind that you're going to have to answer a question. Just imagine, so maybe you don't, but just imagine that you are going to have to answer the question at some point. You're going to have to say, potentially, you want to get that great job that for this really, really, edgy software. And, you only know about the job because some insider told you about it. And they ask you point blank, have you ever used Copilot on any publicly deployed software or proprietary software? And what do you say? No? Well, I use it for education. Okay, but did any of that code that you were educated on ever land in a free and open source project? You say, well, yeah. Now, that might not be enough to keep you off the project. I don't want to scare you, but I don't want to answer that question by saying, oh, yeah, I use Copilot all the time. I never, ever want to answer the question that way because I want to keep my possibilities open. Now, you need to make this judgment for yourself. You need to make a decision. You need to weigh your risk versus opportunity, right? And I've had a very respectable Bob, actually, a very respectable educator, tell me that ChatGPT is one of the best things ever created for education. But just like anything that's this powerful, it's being abused. The first comment I ever had on GPT was from somebody in the chat was, "Oh my God, I just wrote my essay that would have taken me 3 hours and 30 minutes." That was the exact quote. I think the person who said it is here right now. I'm not picking on you, and you don't have to disclose yourself. But if you are writing essays in 30 minutes that would have taken you 3 hours to do the research on, I think that's a mistake. I think it's a huge mistake because you're hurting yourself by doing that, right? How many thousands of dollars of debt are you going into to go to college in the first place? And then you don't want to learn it. You don't want to learn the content. You want to take the time to do the writing. The writing, the act of writing is a good thing. I know it doesn't seem like it. It's annoying, right? But the act of forming a sentence and picking the right verbs and spelling letters properly, even if it takes you 3 hours, is actually good for you. Right? You think, oh, that's just the mundanity of it. I don't want to do that. I want the AI to do that for me. No. Even if it's just typing practice, you should be doing that. You're paying money for the opportunity to learn here, way more than you ever should pay. You're paying thank you for the raid. You're paying way more money than you should ever pay for this opportunity. And now you're throwing it away because what? Because you want to go play Overwatch with Mr. Rob or something? I just think it's insane. I don't know why people are doing it. We're making we're actually in the middle of a QCA YouTube video, so thank you. We just got a great raid from Het Tanis. Appreciate that. Speaking of education, please someone shout out Het Tanis. Het _TANIS HET_TANIS to the YouTubers out there has got to be one of the most substantial, well-credentialed, overall good guys on Twitch for education. If you are not there, you just rated us with 40 people or so. If you are not following Het Tanis and you're in tech, particularly if you're in operations space, you need to go follow Het Tanis. And I mean it. I really do. He knows stuff about things that he's created all kinds of tutorials, interactive tutorials and things. And And I think it's amazing. I'm glad actually, because that lets me go bike a little bit more, because I know Het exists. He can be there and help help us fulfill the need here. So the conclusion on the ChatGPT and the Copilot thing is pretty simple. Okay, if you're going to use it, if you choose to use it, be prepared to answer the question: have you ever used ChatGPT, and why did you use it? Okay, that's all I'm saying. And if you're comfortable lying, fine. I'm not going to judge you. I don't think you should lie. I don't want to lie. I want to answer truthfully. If I use ChatGPT, I'm going to say, oh yeah, I've screwed around with it and answered questions pretty quickly and used it as kind of a substitute for Google search to get me started on my own research. But that's pretty much it. If you can, with a straight face, if you can answer the question that way, then fine. Use ChatGPT. Go for it. It was actually an educator, LTN Bob, LTN_Bob, who doesn't stream that much these days, but a fantastic educator and one of my best friends. He said, you have no idea how amazing this thing is for education. He caused me to change my opinion, actually. So because ChatGPT is a great way to come up with the first part of your research, the RWX, right? The R in RWX for me, research and reading. And ChatGPT is a great way of making that very succinct and making it faster. I'm pretty fast on the command line doing my own research, so I don't really need that. But if somebody wanted that, they could maybe run something through ChatGPT and they would see a number of considerations they hadn't even thought of, right? That other humans hadn't even thought of, right? So I think for that reason, I think ChatGPT is just like a search engine on steroids. And until they start charging for it, which they're going to do, it's proprietary software. I'd say go ahead and do that, right? I did not have sexual relations with ChatGPT. Yeah. Oh God, that's funny. Copilot is another matter. I will never, ever use Copilot. I have no intention of using it. Copilot violated every line of ethics that ever existed in software licensing, for the sake of what? To do something cool for Microsoft and for GitHub. I am morally opposed to Copilot. But if you're not, that's up to you. You make your own decision. I think the fact that they pretty much took the greatest possible advantage of open source developers like me, and that they're now charging for it, is so unethical that I don't want anything to do with it ever. And I'm going to actively campaign against it. I think that is just, excuse my bad language, I think that is just the shittiest thing you can do. And frankly, it's kind of old school Microsoft to do that. I like the new Microsoft a lot. I think they've done a lot of great things, including saving GitHub from financial ruin, which is why I'm okay with GitHub. GitHub has blown away GitLab and other things, and I've done videos on that. I think a lot of the good things, the GitHub has promoted open source development in many, many ways. They've made it easier to sponsor GitHub development, free and open source development, which is why Copilot doesn't make any sense to me, because based on all of this, unless you're going to argue that they just want to make it easier for everybody to give them their software so that they can stick it in their proprietary Borg API and then charge enterprises and lesser developers money to be able to use it, then I mean, that's a kind of a level of like conspiracy theory that I'm not quite okay with. But the problem is that it's just too ethically, shady for me to ever get behind it. Now, I know a lot of you really, really love it, and that's fine. And I am not judging you, right? If you want, you make your own decision, but being an open source developer who spent thousands of hours writing free software that is now being stolen straight up by a proprietary company and put into an AI to help other developers without any attribution whatsoever. Okay, take a breath. I gotta take a breath. Okay, I'm gonna take a breath here. Okay, I gotta take a breath there. All right, okay, I'm back here. All right, so every single piece of code on GitHub is either free and open source, and there is not a single, the percentage, you can go do a search for this, the percentage of, just use it, public domain software on GitHub is very low. Most of the software on GitHub is MIT with attribution, or some other license that by legal requirement requires attribution. Do you see Copilot attributing any of that? Do you see any Copilot attribution when Copilot gives you an answer that's based off of the licensed software, the legally licensed under a FOSS license software, and when it combines 4 or 5 or 10 different answers from those legally licensed projects which require by law attribution, and you get that nice happy answer, and it doesn't say a single thing about those developers who slaved over that shit and put it out there for one thing only. You know what? The only thing a free and open source developer gets is credit. That's it. We do it for the love of our hearts and everything. We're giving you the best of our software for free. The only thing we want, the only thing that we get out of that is attribution. And so for Copilot to completely destroy attribution and to steal all of that code because it's free, and to take away the one thing that causes me to code to release my code on GitHub. For them to take that away is absolutely beyond evil to me. The fact that they would even do it just absolutely makes me want to vomit, because they have basically taken the sacrifice, the time, sweat, blood, and tears, and they have taken everything that everybody has ever contributed to open source, and the only thing that we ever got out of it, and they've stolen that away from them. They've taken it. That is theft. It's theft. It's illegal. It shouldn't exist. Copilot should be shut down. I'm done with that rant. And if you don't agree with that, that's fine. You can go ahead and continue to steal our software for free through Copilot, because that's what you're doing. Every time you do a completion in Copilot, you're stealing somebody's software. Somebody who released that software with attribution as a license, and you're using it without that attribution. And because they've covered it up for you behind some AI, you think it's okay, but you're not. You're a fucking thief. All right, I'm done with that rant. I lost somebody already for doing that. Somebody left me in the audience. But I think if you're going to use Copilot, that's what I really feel. You got it out of me. You got my actual answer. There you go. I'm just trying to write code here. I'm just trying to write code here. All right, I'm going to calm down now. All right. And now here comes Zen Rob is coming back. I promise. So anyway, yeah, there we go. That's what I think. And I think that ChatGPT is just the extension of that. Right. And I think that some people that are, should just to see if ChatGPT generates a bonds of CLI. I don't know, probably not. Otherwise, you'd have to open your eyes on a lot of about the theft, grifting, and AI. No, well, okay, magic. I know people take me. Look, it's already been determined in court. So the regular argument against what I've just said, and just to be fair, I'm going to put it out there before we end. We only have 5 minutes. So the regular argument that says that Copilot is fine is that there's already been, legal precedent for using AI to generate things, and it's been found to be fine. I don't think that, I have something more to read possibly, but I don't think that there's been enough research in where they're getting it. The legality here about whether you should use it. Yeah. Oh, that's for my country. You're talking about a different country? Yeah, that's a completely different thing. Yeah, if you're in a country where there's no such thing as copyright, then yeah, I don't know if that's true. But and that, again, this is a personal choice. But I think using software that's generated off of software that was put out there for the only purpose is to get attribution out of it, and taking that away, I think that's bad. Bottom line, will AI take over developer jobs? Let's answer this really quick. I have 4 minutes left. And I just want to answer this question really quickly. I do think that AI will take over most developer jobs. And I've said this openly. I happen to work supporting, I'm a Kubernetes admin for a machine learning group, a high performance machine learning group that has computing power that if it were public, they would be within the top 5 in the world. And we support something like 20 to 100 machine learning experts. And I spend a lot of time with that. I've watched a lot of NVIDIA videos about the future of AI and where it's going. And and the whole ChatGPT and the Copilot thing. So I actually do think that most developer tasks are going, and I'm not talking about writing code. I'm talking about the change in how we create stuff. I made it. Yeah. So I personally think that that the entire model for creating software, telling computers what to do, we'll say, is going to change. It already has, right? Let me give you an example of this. So when you are interacting with Alexa or Siri or Google, from the command line, it is a command line. When you're talking to your phone or you're typing stuff into there is, in Alexa, there's still an algorithm that it uses. And it last I checked, it was a couple of years ago, but it still breaks it down. And I still think there's a place for algorithmic command line thing. And that's why I made Bonsai. That's why I'm making Pagan and made my own meta languages to define grammars. I still think there's a need for it. But if you look at, for example, I have a Google phone, a Google Pixel. I had a flip phone for 2 years and finally gave in. I just said, I got to have a smartphone. Couldn't even create that's another question all by itself. And that phone is so intelligent. I can barely mutter under my breath to that phone, and it will hear exactly what I said and it will get it right. And I've watched it correct itself. And that's because, that's machine learning right there. That is the most powerful natural language processing algorithm probably out there, built on probably the largest corpus of data available, which, by the way, Google doesn't make available to any of the sociologists that are requesting access to do the research, which I think is evil, but whatever, it's a corporation. And so the point I'm trying to make here is, if you were to write the algorithm to process the command line, any possible command line, it'd be impossible, right? You can't do it. And I think that there are going to be more and more tasks that are not going to be possible through algorithmic programming. And that is going to require neural nets and whatever form of machine learning you want to talk about. And I'm a complete idiot when it comes to machine learning. I've actually talked to several other people who work in machine learning all the time, some of whom who stream. And I actually, for 2024, which is next year, 2024, my personal goal is to actually move to machine learning. I'm an operations guy, and operations has already started to be hit by machine learning. So let me give you an example of this. Okay. So I love, security, even though I'm not technically a hacker and I don't hack people all the time. I have caught them and I have hacked people, but lately, and there's two areas where, AI is going to significantly change operations, and it's already starting to. One of them is detecting patterns in usage. So the number one way to attack an enterprise is through phishing attacks, which, by the way, I got phished. This is funny. Last week I got phished by our security group, and I had to take like 5 minutes of training. I was like, oh, damn, they just got me. Because it was funny because the phish they sent me was even related to something I had recently done. It was really creative. And they got me, they phished me. And so I had to go to this little bit of, email training. Well, some of the best cybersecurity software that's out there is going to, it already detects patterns. You can call it a privacy violation if you want. It doesn't matter. It's an enterprise and they're dealing with like massive data theft. And so they are there's AI that's monitoring erratic behavior. You're sending emails at 2 a.m., things like that. And they are going to eventually, AI is already there, right? Another area, this is not really AI yet, but so if you think about network packet switching, right, and scanning, so if anybody knows anything about Cisco versus Palo Alto routers, anybody want to tell me the difference between the two? I learned this the hard way. It was kind of fun. So I'll tell you the story. It's kind of a fun story, and I'll be done here. So I was, I ran SkillStack. I taught young people about everything. Meraki is good. Cisco or Meraki, I don't know. Cisco, Meraki, they're not the same, but yes. Yeah, well, y'all know much more about this, so I'll let you answer that question yourselves. But let me tell you my story. So I was running skill stack, and I had a bunch of smart people who were really bored at their regular school, and so they would regularly want to SSH into the skill stack server and do stuff that they cared about, and that was challenging them. And so they would regularly, pull up a terminal on their Mac or their Windows machine, PuTTY or whatever, while at school. One kid actually got sent to the principal's office just for using the terminal because the kid next to him tattletaled on him for hacking. No kidding, that truly happened. And so a lot of these school networks don't allow port 22, which is SSH, right? Secure shell. It's a remote terminal connection to something. And so we got around that by their server. I ran a secure shell server listening on port 443, which is traditionally HTTPS, TLS. It's the one that's secure, right? And I still had a web server up on port 80, but actually my web server was someplace else being hosted. And so they would SSH to the multi-user system on skillstack.sh, and they would SSH to 443, and they would bypass all of the security from the firewalls and routers and everything because it only looked at what port was traveling. And then we were fine, right? But then I tried the same thing at the community college, and the community college, it turns out they have Palo Alto routers, and the Palo Alto's routers would inspect the packet. So rather than just saying everything on port 443 is fine, they would actually, take the packet apart, look inside inside of the packet, and then they would see that packet was gonna be bad. See you. And then we're gonna wrap up here. And so that's Palo Alto routers. And I think that AI is going to get even better at network inspection. I think that the AI is going to be able to discover and optimize network routes and stuff. And I also think that AI is going to take position really solidly. I don't know of one yet, but eventually we're going to see AI-like things enter into the hashing algorithms that happen, right? So one of the reasons, for example, that a Go map they actually came out and they officially made it safe for this, but before then it was unspecified, and you would never know if it was safe to use a map. A map is a key value pair thing. You look it up. Every single map list, whatever you want to call them, every single one of those uses what's called a hashing algorithm in order to look up the data. It's a teeny tiny little database query, and some of those algorithms use caching for the most common things. A dictionary is another form for it. It's whatever you want to call it. That's the data model for data type. And so some of those, the reason that some of those maps are not safe for concurrency is because sometimes they will use a write operation to cache the most frequently looked up things in the lookup, and they'll give you back that thing. And so the lookups become much more efficient, and the hash in general, all your code overall becomes more efficient. So that depends on the hashing algorithm. If you're going to do computer science, you're going to be able to see computer science is going to help you understand that. You might end up writing your own hashing algorithm at some point. And that's why, some dictionaries are faster than others. It just depends on how you use them. But I do think that there is an area where in that space, some form of AI may take shape. Right now, it's still very algorithmic, but at some point that might actually happen where we get that. As Bill says too, NLP has been slow. I can remember voice recognition from the 90s was awful, and it struggles with foreign languages. Yeah, it's getting better. So NLP is getting better, and I happen to think that that there's still a very solid place for algorithmic programming, particularly by creating grammars. And this is why I've put so much effort into Pagan, parsing expression grammar notation, my PackRat parser, Radix, and into Bonsai, which is, command lines without dashes in them that can be spoken. I think that there's still a solid place for developers to do algorithmic programming. I think the algorithmic program we do, though, is going to more and more take the form of grammars and basically Alexa. Alexa is still an algorithmic. There's no natural language. There's no AI in it at all. It's still all algorithmic stuff. And there's going to, so my point is this, I think that there's going to be a shift, and right now, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, so last year and year before that, there was literally nothing that said machine learning and data science instructor. I mean, now there's almost nothing in there. And now it's the fastest growing tech job. It actually, I think it's 37% now, which is faster than cybersecurity, which is 32%, which was the fastest growing before that. Among the tech jobs, and software engineer, I think, is still around like 20%, 18 to 20%. That's the growth rate. So there's going to be a tremendous amount of work in this space. Knowing how to communicate with somebody who does machine learning, for any kind of operations person or any kind of, it's the same thing as like in the old school days when you did operations, you're a system administrator, they called you, right? And in those days, we had to make sure that we could speak database, right? A lot of times people wouldn't even know how to optimize their database. They just wanted to use their database. And I find a lot of parallels to that relationship in the enterprise, or anywhere, today with the AI people, right? So you have the SRE now, or the DevOps, or it's not really DevOps. I call it infrastructure engineer. And then you have, the machine learning people, and they've taken kind of the place of, the DBAs that you would interact with. And then you get crossover. You have DBAs that know how to use Linux. You get DBAs that know how to code a little bit. And then you get DBAs that just know how to do SQL queries and optimize their databases and stuff, but they have no idea about the underlying computer operations and, how to set up disk and everything. And so you have this kind of symbiotic relationship between the person who's in charge of the database and the person who's in charge of the the system and network. A lot of times that's included. And I do think that AI is definitely stepping into that space. So if you want to stay in operations and you don't know how to talk to an AI person or a machine learning person, AI is a term you're not supposed to use. I'm going to put ML here. ML is a form of AI. AI is a much broader term. There are people that will roast me to death by not having those terms proper. I know, because I've been to machine learning meetups. Yeah, they absolutely hate the term data scientist. They hate it. Like, what the hell does that mean? So just be careful of that. So that's my answer on that. Those are my questions for today. Do you have a plan on how to transition into ML from ops? I do not, and I don't plan to do that necessarily. I just want to be prepared for machine learning. By the way, machine learning is basically math. And so machine learning benefits tremendously from the things that an academic degree would get you. Systems administration, programming, applications development, those sort of things actually kind of suffer from a college degree, because you're not actually making anything. You're just learning how the computers work. You're learning computer science. You're not learning applications development. And this has become a regular problem. This has become a really serious regular problem for people in the systems administration. MIT has a thing called the lost semester, which teaches you how to use the Linux command line. I think that should have been the first thing they taught you. So that's my take on that. The only thing I was trying to say there is, if you want to go into machine learning, I would definitely err on the side of getting a degree. I would get a math degree. I would get, if you can, get a computer, a machine learning degree. I can tell you this, though, that the machine learning, these brilliant PhDs, mathematics, machine learning people that I work with on occasion at work, that they don't, I'm not even kidding. They one time opened up the GUI in order to rename a file. So, they for some reason, they don't learn the Linux command line, even though they're brilliant. That actually happened in a demonstration. They were teaching us all this other stuff, and they were doing command line stuff all over the place. But when it came to renaming a file, they opened up the file explorer to rename the file. I'm not even kidding. That actually happened. That happened in front of a presentation with 200 people, and I was shaking my head. I could not believe it. And I to this day, I will never, ever, ever forget that. Yeah, stream is going to be up on YouTube. So, don't be that, right? So if you're going to go into the academic part of machine learning, don't forget to learn, the basics, the essentials, the foundation, the Linux command line, bash, SSH, tmux, how to research from the command line. In my opinion, those things are all covered in the boost, by the way. There are still boost videos up there, which you can go watch. I will not be doing a boost for 2024 because we're in the middle of a move. But you can still go back and add the other one. And when we do have a boost, we'll have a book to go with it. So there you go. And that's all I have for today for YouTube. So thank you for tuning in. And, leave your comments below, all that jazz. Bye.